Hello and welcome to my cake kitchen. My name is Gladys and over here I make simple informative tutorials to help you navigate cake decorating easily. So if you love cakes as much as I do, well, you're on to the right channel today, because today we're doing one of my favorite things, which is making all things chocolate. We're going to be making a simple chocolate cake that I will leave in the oven, and then we'll come back and then stack a 6-inch 3-layered cake. Most importantly, I think the chocolate cake we're just going to be baking is something to do. The main focus will be the 3-layer chocolate cake that we're going to be filling, stacking. We'll be talking through the tools and materials that will help you get this job done right. And more importantly, I'll be handing you my tips and tricks to help you decorate your cake, especially if you're a beginner or pros alike who is in for picking some handy tips. So without having to waste your time, let's just get right in there. I have over here some flour and chocolate, which I have already measured. This is a very popular recipe that is on my channel. I will link all of the information regarding what I'm doing here in the description box, including extra information that will prove useful to you. There is also a catalog of recipes and detailed tutorials breaking down the decorating process with so much information, which is centered on beginner friendly tips for you to get the best out of decorating your cake. So I will link some of those resources in the description box. So do well to peruse around the homepage and check out some of the tutorials that are helpful on this channel. And I hope you find some value with that. So over here, I've got the flour and cocoa powder with a pinch of salt and some baking soda. I have already gone ahead and made my chocolate cake base. The chocolate cake here has the liquid part and of course the dry part. What is good about this chocolate recipe is that it is rich. It gives you it kind of fills the space between a sponge that is not super light but it's not super dense. It's incredibly moist, and that is my recipe that I adapted and developed myself. So I have created it time and again, and actually it's my son's favorite chocolate cake to eat. I have created a video tutorial based on his last birthday, so I'll link all of that in the description box for you. But without having to waste your time, we are just going to jump right in. Today I am going to be baking those in 2 5-inch tins. I have gone ahead and prepared that. Oh, more importantly, the cake that we are going to be filling and covering and decorating, parts of it, we're going to make the buttercream, and I'm going to show you some quick tricks that should help you get the best out of your buttercream process. So let's get on to this. Over here, I'm just going to introduce the liquid part into the dry ingredients over here, and I chose to go for a hand mixer for convenience and also for the quantity. The quantity here is just enough that a hand mixer should do. But when I've made large quantities, I have employed the services of this handy Kenwood over here behind me. But the use of a hand mixer also means that this recipe is so beginner friendly enough. If you're a beginner looking for a quick recipe and you have some handy tools at home in your kitchen for use, why not? If you started baking, I would encourage you to get yourself a basic hand mixer. It does the job, especially when you're starting out and you're not baking larger quantities. But of course, if over time you're looking to pick yourself a great mixer, you want to look at the Coca. It is an Amazon choice type mixer that I have purchased myself and reviewed it. I bought it with my own money, and the intention for buying that was because I just wanted to be able to recommend a beginner friendly mixer that would come efficient and effective for use. So every word I have preached in that tutorial, you can take it for what it is. And I think I made that tutorial, it wasn't when I bought the mixer when I made it. I made it quite a while later, which meant that I had had time to use it and test it enough to be able to have like a wholesome view of what it is like. So I highly encourage you to check that mixer out. It's the Coca. I'll link all of that in the description box. So I've just gone ahead and added the liquid ingredients here, and I've just added 3 large eggs. This is one of the recipes that is so adaptable that you don't have to worry about the amount of eggs. I've increased the eggs depending on how much moisture and consistency I want to the butter, and sometimes you can decrease it, but this is 3 large eggs. Like I said, I'll leave all that information in the description box. So I'm going to mix this really quickly until all of the ingredients are homogeneously mixed together. Now that is all mixed together. Now I am careful to not over mix this butter, but it's all mixed in now, and I'm going to add a dash of vanilla in there as flavor. Over here we don't measure our vanilla. You add enough till your heart is happy. So, but I'll leave the exact quantities in the description box conveniently for you to check out. So that's all mixed together. We have a lovely consistency of butter here, but we want to be careful not to over mix it. And I will be splitting this into 2 5-inch tins. So let's see how far we get with this one. I am careful to not overfill the tins just in case. So let's see. Okay. I mean, I love myself a good chocolate cake, but boy, isn't it hard when you have chocolate everywhere. The color of it is not exactly appealing, is it? Right, if you've been on this channel, you will know I complain about this a lot. When you have just a bit of butter that you can't do anything about, but you also don't want to overfill your pan. Okay, right, so we fill that up enough. If you're filling the cake pans, you want to be careful to not overfill the pans, because then you would have the rise of the butter collapsing over the lip of your pans. So it's almost always advisable to leave up to about 1/3 of the space up, depending on what your leavening situation is. For me, I try to have extra guarantee by having the greaseproof paper or liners which rises above the tins, so it gives me guarantee that even if the cake rises, it will be held within the confines of the greaseproof paper. Another thing that does is it helps to give the cake extra height. I mean, these are 4-inch deep tins, so when they do rise, I end up about 5-inch if you like. But you want to, when I also do that, an advantage I have with the rise is that I am then able to level the cake and still retain the original height of the cake that I want. But that is all. If you want these results, you want to be careful about your recipe and how it is adapted. The good thing about mine is that I adapt my own recipes, so I look out to solve some problems that I would rather not have in the baking process. But that's a good tip to have, that do not overfill your pans, and ensure that you have some sort of space between when the pan is filled enough for when it also rises. So with that said, I'm just going to dump this in the oven and set an alarm for perhaps an hour or an hour and a half, and then we'll be back to decorate our chocolate cake. Now our cake is gone in to bake. We're back to prepping for the cake that is to be filled, stacked, and lightly crumb coated with some buttercream with small chocolatey decorations, so that our cake will be done. Now, it's almost always advisable or recommended that when you want to make a cake and you're talking fillings, i.e. buttercream, your buttercream has to be spreadable. It has to be at room temperature, it has to be spreadable. Of course, that is not the case for my buttercream here, and there's good reason for that. I could have set this all up and filled the cake up. But here's a question that I would like you to think about. Life happens, and some days you forget your buttercream and it doesn't come to room temperature on time. You have an emergency where you've pre-made your buttercream, but the emergency is such that you have to bring your buttercream to room temperature quickly enough so you can work with it. What options are available for you, and what can you do? So I have intentionally left this to chill and it's not spreadable at all. We have French buttercream here made with whole eggs. That is a recipe I have on my channel right up here. I'll be linking much of that in the description box. In the tutorial for French buttercream, I think I have 2 different recipes for that. I even created a live also where I talk through all the ingredients, why it is what it is. It is a very, very adaptable recipe because you can make French buttercream with whole eggs, egg yolks alone, or a mix of both. It is not a very stable buttercream. However, if you're not looking to optimize for stability, because I cover my cakes generally in ganache, it is a great adaptable buttercream to have, especially considering it makes use of both eggs and egg yolks. So when I have had to make Swiss meringue buttercream, which uses only egg whites, I tend to save my yolks for French buttercream. And in cases where I can only make it with just egg yolks, if I have enough egg yolks, it goes towards making buttercream, which prevents wastage. And if I have just enough where I need to support it with some other eggs, I have more egg yolks, and then I'll throw in some whole eggs in there. And where I don't have any of the egg yolks to use, I just focus on using whole eggs. So it is completely adaptable. I love this buttercream, so I highly recommend it. But back to the subject here of our frosty, less spreadable buttercream. How do we bring it back to room temperature? Now, a few things you want to note when you're working with buttercream that is not at room temperature is that the emulsion then breaks, so you have some sort of separation. It is not very spreadable. Of course, how are you going to spread this? And it's not very smooth looking, so you can see, especially for this sort of buttercream, you can see a clear separation between the fats in it. So one way you want to be able to bring it back to room temperature quickly is to probably put it in the microwave. That is if you don't have time to leave it to come to room temperature. But in the microwave, you want to be very careful also, because you miss the time and it is likely to melt, and then you have messy, syrupy buttercream that is of no use to you. But in this case, we are going to make things a little bit complicated by turning this particular buttercream into a chocolate buttercream. So how do you do that? Well, I have my ultimate chocolate buttercream recipe on this channel, which I talk you through the entire process, breaking down how I create my chocolate buttercream. So I'll link that also down, but essentially I am attempting to repeat that process right on here. So what I have done, especially for this chocolate buttercream, is to avoid using cocoa powder, which can sometimes be a little sour on and doesn't guarantee a great mouthfeel. I mean, if you have a great recipe, it will work for you, but sometimes you want to look out for how some ingredients affect overall taste and mouthfeel, and especially because buttercream is such that it is almost the thing that adds an oomph to your cake. You want to make sure your buttercream is great tasting, but more than anything, it has a great mouthfeel. If you've been on this channel, I am big on mouthfeel, and that is because if you have something in your mouth, you want to be guaranteed the best experience in your mouth. So I am huge on how not just how something tastes, but how it feels in the mouth. And for my chocolate cake, I want to optimize for that. It has to be smooth. It doesn't have to be sickly. It has to disappear quickly on the tongue, and you just want to crave more and more and more of that. And which is why I have focused on creating this buttercream that is sort of made with parts of the buttercream and dark chocolate. This dark chocolate is about 65%, but it really doesn't matter either way, whether you're using milk chocolate, 70% dark cocoa chocolate, however else or whatever ingredients you're using, it has been optimized for being able to adapt it to suit specific preferences. So over here I had 200 grams of chocolate that I threw in 100 grams of the buttercream frozen, and then I put that in the microwave, melted it together, and then this is what we have. We have a sort of paste here that I am going to mix into this buttercream. Now, if I mixed this into the buttercream here, which is chill, it will seize and I'm going to have difficulty. It will get lumpy. So what I'm probably going to do is I'm going to put this in the microwave so that it warms up slightly. When it warms up and I introduce it back in the buttercream, what it will do is that it will lift the separated emulsion, hold it together, and then mix up. So let's see how that gets. I'm going to dump that quickly in the microwave, but I'm not looking to melt it. I'm just looking to warm it up slightly. Okay, we've got that in the microwave, and this is the consistency we have. It's still a paste, but it is slightly warm. I will leave the exact measurements in there. I normally don't measure because it is quite an adaptable recipe, but so that you can get the best out of this, I will leave instructions in the description box. I will also be linking the detailed video. I will also be linking the detailed video from previously for you to check out. So what I am going to do here is mix this in slightly. You can see the warmth of the chocolate is melting the buttercream together. There is something about this chocolate buttercream that I love, that it is incredibly creamy, has a rich, smooth taste, and it's not overwhelmingly sweet at all. Let's see how we can. I hate to say it, but just like that, we have chocolate buttercream. In the time that we've been here, we've managed to make ourselves a smooth. Let's have a look at how rich tasting this is. Good thing is you can reduce the amount of chocolate for a lighter chocolate taste, or you can increase it for a richer chocolate taste. But this is about all that I wanted. And the cake we're going to be decorating is very, very simplistic. The idea here is to give you some tips on how to put a cake together. If you find yourself in a pickle and you're a beginner and you feel like, oh, what am I supposed to do? If you chance on this video, it should give you all that you need to work out how to put a quick cake together. So I'm just going to talk through a few of the things that we need for this task. The task here is to fill, stack, and cover a 6-inch 3-layered cake lightly, finishing it off with small basic decorations such as using chocolate to finish the decoration up. Essentially, we're not doing anything fancy, but it's always important to also stick to the process of decorating a cake so that you can achieve best results. Over here in front of me is a turntable. I mean, this is a very cheap plastic turntable that I picked up many years ago when I started baking, and I searched all baking tutorials and cake decorating tutorials where it was recommended that to be able to get best results you want to use a turntable. I had no idea what a turntable is, but essentially it has a turn mechanism that is put together to assist in scraping a cake effectively or easily. Do you need a turntable? Perhaps yes. Do you need an expensive one? No. Actually, the story behind this particular turntable is that not only is it cheap and still efficient, for almost 5 to 6 years of my baking or cake decorating career, I continued to use this for some of my best cakes and most advanced work. It was only later when I felt a need to invest into something different, and it was just because I buckled under the pressure of a fancier turntable that I went and picked a new one. So my encouragement to you is that if you're starting baking and decorating, invest in great things that will prove useful. But if you're not sure and you're just edging in, it's probably best to pick up some things that you may then later upgrade or make decisions about. But this was about a 10-pound turntable, and it is still useful, which is what we are going to be using. Over that will be a non-slip mat. A non-slip mat is effectively helpful for stopping shifting. This has worn out slightly, so There are other ways you can stop your cake from shifting and sliding, which I will come to in a moment. But in the meantime, there's this non-slip mat to assist with the shifting and sliding of the cake, because when you're working on decorating a cake, you want to make sure your cake is still steady when you're scraping around the cake, and there is good reason for that. Some of the tools we would require is what you call offset spatula. I have my big large offset spatula here for larger diameter cakes, and I have a smaller one here. Neither one is better or worse, depends on the task. So you want to make sure that you have the appropriate tools for the right task. If I was using this small offset spatula for filling into a cake, which is big, like let's say a 10 in 12 inch, it will take me forever. But a small spatula is also useful for getting into corners and to be able to get fine details. So each tool in the decorating process has a purpose, and for today I'm probably going to be settling well, this came as a set of I think 3 or 4 offset spatulas, and this is about the longest one, which is an overkill for this purpose. But perhaps today I'm going to be settling on the medium sized one in length and these small ones, which are going to be used for the task. And then after that, we have a set of scrapers. I mean, I came with a selection just for the purpose of informing you, but I will show you what I'll be using today. There are plastic ones and there are metal scrapers. A scraper is just used for the purpose of cleaning the buttercream or any excess hanging ganache or elements that are on the cake. So they are more for polishing and finishing off the look of the cake, if you like. But you have plastic ones and you have stainless steel ones. This essentially is not a scraper by any chance. It was actually a dough cutter, but it doubles as good for scraping a cake when I need to. So I've actually used it for the purposes of cutting scraping cakes. But between the plastic and stainless steel ones, I will always recommend the stainless steel, which is the food safe stainless steel, and that is simply because it is versatile for both buttercream cakes and ganache cake. You will find that ganache cakes do have some slight problems that come with them because they set quickly. So you want to make sure that you have a scraper that is robust enough to work the surface of the cake when you're working with that. And I find that the plastic ones, besides bending, are not very robust for the task, but that is genuinely a case of preference. I prefer the stainless steel ones to the plastic scrapers either way. So that is my recommendation based on preference, experience, and use. But you could pick either of the two, and I suppose it will be equally useful. In decorating a cake, I also have a round cake card. In some places, cake circle, same thing. This is a 6-inch diameter, which is the same size of the cake here. We have a 3-layered cake, and we'll come to details on how to use this in the cake decorating process. For me, a cake card, for most people, the idea of using cake cards are not usually recommended, and it's neither here nor there. Whether you use it or don't use it doesn't necessarily make it a good or a bad thing. For me, there are specific reasons why I prefer the cake card, and that is for the handling of the cake. I work on a cake surface only to transfer from the surface to the final surface where the cake is displayed. So having a cake card helps to create a barrier between my board surface and the cake, that when I come to lift the cake off the board on which I was working, it stops me getting into the cake. So it prevents contact. It also helps to secure the cake from underneath and helps with the transfer process. So it is more for convenience, but also to safeguard the cake for transfer when it needs to. And that is the reason, and that's because I have created my process to transfer from one surface to the other. But if I was making a cake at home where it will be displayed on say a cake plate or a cake stand, perhaps you don't need it. But I think the best thing is always to explain and teach the best method, and then when you master it, you can do whatever you want. So my recommendation will be, wherever possible, go for a cake card. But in this case, you can equally use a cake board, which is more sturdy. depending on what you're trying to achieve. Say for my heavier, denser cake, say if I was building a cake that was 7 layers tall, then a cake card is just going to be flimsy. So for that, for securing the base of the cake, I would prefer to use a cake board, which is the same diameter but a little thicker, which is something like this with a thicker rim, but it's smaller in diameter for that matter. Now with cake cards or cake circles comes a cake board. In many cases, most people don't require a cake board. What's the work surface? I'm not sure. For me, I require the cake board because that is my work surface. It is my primary work surface over which the cake is worked on and then will later be transferred for display. My intention is that hopefully once we decorate this cake, we can transfer it onto this small cake stand here. That is if we get to that part. So essentially these are the primary elements that are needed for decorating a cake. So for the cake itself, we have for the cake itself we have a 3-layered 6-inch cake, which is rather small if you like. But as an addition, we might be able to cut into this cake and see how many servings we can derive from a cake like this when it's all done. This was a recipe I was actually developing and I had some issues with it, but I've discussed that in a few various shorts that I will probably be linking in the description box. So a few things to consider before you fill and layer your cake. You want to make sure that your cake has at least baked and settled. What do I mean by that? You can bake we talk about fresh cakes, fresh cakes, fresh cakes. Baking from scratch and a fresh cake is great, but it isn't great when you have to stack a fresh cake. Now there are reasons that will call for stacking a fresh cake. I mean, if you have an emergency, what can you do? But preferably ensure that your cake has settled so that the crumb is set. You will have better results because a freshly baked cake is delicate. The crumb is very delicate and can be difficult to put together. It does fall apart easily and can create structural problems for you. But if you have a cake that has been baked, let's say 24 hours earlier, to settle the crumb, you are starting on a good foot. Some people choose to freeze their cakes and then bring it back to room temperature to increase moisture, but also for convenience. Neither of the process is a good nor bad thing. I guess all of that supports an effective stacking process. So I baked this cake, left it in the fridge for 2 days now. And you can see this crumb is actually a little dense. The particular recipe here bakes super dense. So you can see it's sticky on my hands. So this is like a rich chocolatey cake that I have left to set. And for that reason, it should unlikely fall apart, if you like. For me to stack this cake, I have to start from somewhere. So on my work surface, first things first, I'm going to spread some buttercream. If you've watched any of my tutorials on here, you'll find I do this with ganache, but today we're working with buttercream. And then that little amount of buttercream here serves as glue to hold this card onto the cake surface to stop the cake from shifting. Now at this stage, if you were a complete beginner, my advice to you would be to leave this to set first. So ideally you can do this beforehand, prior to starting the process. You can do this and then leave it in the fridge. It secures the card to the board surface so that the cake is not going to be shifting on you. But obviously I can handle a bit of a cake shifting around. So let's see. The next thing here is to have some chocolate buttercream spread around. And now that is going to be the glue to hold the first layer of cake over the cake surface, the card surface. If I was stacking a 7 layered cake, as in if the layers were heavy, more than this, especially with such denser, heavy cakes, because the more layers can tower down on the cake, the heavier it gets. If I was going to do that, I would definitely be replacing this card here with a board, and I'll be leaving this cake right here to set or chill before I stacked more on it. Also, when you're filling a cake, it all seems all great until you realize that weather has a lot to do with best results when you're filling and stacking a cake. Of course, it was warmer earlier today in England, but I will be careful if I was filling a cake like this in the summer, because you have melty buttercream melting left, right, and center. You have cakes shifting. I actually have a video on here where the cake literally fell apart, and I mean literally fell apart, and I had to put it together. Over here, we show our mistakes just to encourage you to understand that yes, the decorating process is a taxing and difficult one, but all you need is to master the process and get used to the discomfort that comes with getting best results, and then you are on to a win. So with that said, I have the the cake here. I'm just going to go ahead and spread some buttercream on top. Now, there are several ways you can apply buttercream. First of all, you have to determine how much quantity you desire. It's a case of preference. Now, like I said earlier, this buttercream is great, but it's not the most stable here. So if I was filling this in, say, summer hot weather, I will probably layer it, leave it to chill, come back, layer it, and leave it to chill. But the weather is on my side, and it's 11 p.m. It's really not going to be a big problem. So let's go ahead and add some. When I am filling my cake or eating a cake, I don't want to be overwhelmed by buttercream. So I guess that idea is influencing my options here. But either way, the ratio of buttercream to cake isn't really bad over here. Now, at this stage, this is what you would call a naked cake. The cake is literally naked. I recently tried to explain a naked cake to a married man who was trying to buy a cake for his wife. I mean, the man had no idea about cakes, but it was critical in my consultation with him. It was critical that he had an understanding of the various choices and options available to him, so he's well informed to make his choice for his wife. So that was quite the task, because normally, whilst I have generalized language in explaining to clients when they contact me for a cake, this was right. There was a lot riding on this one. So I don't know where the idea came from, but I found myself just whipping up the explanation that think about a cake, the different types of cake, the categories, as say a naked woman on the beach. A naked cake simply means that your naked wife at the beach. And a semi-naked has various options. So think of that also as, say, the naked woman who decided that she wants to wear a bikini. Mind you, bikini can range from a small bikini suit to a full body suit. So neither is the choice, and preference is neither here nor there. Whatever floats your boat. You can be there with just like barely there or something, and that's where you're talking lightly covered cakes, to when the cake is completely covered with buttercream full on. So that will perhaps be the full bodysuit. I guess you're following. Then the fondant cakes is, well, somebody who decided that they have a full bodysuit, but they were going to have a whole kaftan to drape them. I think in the end he got the idea, and of course the simple thought was that the more clothes you have on, the more expensive they are, because then you have to pay more for more clothes. So he understood then that going for a fondant cake was going to cost him more, but a non-fondant cake was neither going to be here nor there. Eventually he made the choice, but it was something that got me thinking. That was funny. And to add to that, the conversation developed into the height of the cakes and the design perspectives that he would have wanted. So I had to explain to him double barrel cakes, because cake language is quite specific, and I try not to overwhelm clients. So wherever possible, I try to represent the idea of cakes in everyday conversation or everyday observation. So I was like, The best way to explain a double barrel cake to this client was to think about the double barrel cake, because in this with this particular intention, we were trying to establish how we could adapt a particular an 8-inch cake to say a taller 6-inch, and what the difference in that representation was. So it wasn't just the aesthetics of it that a slender taller cake probably looked better. It was a question of why would we want to adapt an 8-inch cake. I think I'm going on a tangent here, but hear me, I love cakes, so I could do cakes till the death of me. But anyway, so it was a case of just trying to explain why we could possibly adapt an 8-inch 4-layered cake to a 6-inch 6-layered cake, which is a double barrel cake. So I found myself going, okay, just think of the 8-inch cake as the chubby lady over here. She's pretty, she's great, but she's a little bit on the chubbier side. And then the 6-inch is the slender lady with long legs. Like, next day I'm sitting there, and then I get a text of this guy's like, oh, for the cake, I'll prefer the long lady, the lady with the long legs. It's like, okay, well, I don't sell ladies, I do sell cakes. And that was something to laugh about. But enough of that random story of cakes. This is rather a shorter lady. She's not chubby, and she definitely hasn't got long legs. But it's a shorter cake. So at this stage, you would probably be best served putting this cake in the fridge, especially if you were looking for a cleaner, polished looking cake. You want to put this cake in the fridge for it to set on the sides, but to make sure that your cake layers are properly aligned also is to use the scraper to go around the cake to clean the edges nicely, so that you, if the layers are not aligned on the card underneath, it will not shift evenly. But if it shifts seamlessly with the scrape being so clean, then you know that your cake layers are aligned. Also, when you're stacking a cake, I mean, we have a single tiered cake right here. There's not much happening here. But if we were tiering this cake, as in if there was one over the other, you want to be careful, because you want to make sure you have a level top. But that's not what we're doing today. So for the basics, we have covered the materials, we have covered the tools that you would require. I have handed you tips on what you should do or look out for. So I'm not going to chill this cake at this moment in time. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to cover it in buttercream. I did say that it is going to be a rather simple design. So, and then I'm going to spread the buttercream over this. The good thing is that the buttercream spreads finely and easily, so I am not applying pressure to the cake itself. If I was applying pressure to the cake itself, it will probably shift, because the buttercream is still a little bit light and not set over the cake. But here we are. I am not looking for a super polished cake today at all. It's just to give you something for you to see how to put a cake together simply. Now, if I were to put a lot of pressure on the cake, you will find that it will shift. Now, I'm just going to go ahead and scrape. I am having to remind myself not to do this in one go, and to remember I'm teaching, because having done this for nearly a decade, it comes like natural to me that I will go and do this in one go. And when scraping the cake, you want to make sure that your cake scraper is sitting right on the surface of your work surface, and at a 45 sort of angle ish. And then all you have to do is turn the cake surface with the cake. Yeah. And the intention of scraping the cake is not so much to scrape and clean it thoroughly. It is just to level the surface in a polished manner whilst also ridding of any excess buttercream that is on the cake. And I hope that kind of makes some sort of sense. Now, the reason why I wanted warm water, say if I had settled this in the fridge for it to set, being able to clean this and get a nice surface, I might want to dip my stainless steel scrapers in warm water, but clearly I don't need that now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this cake off, leave it in the fridge to set for maybe 10 minutes whilst I clear the work surface, and then we're going to come back, transfer this onto our cake stand, and then we'll finish it off with the chocolate decoration set. That is our simple chocolate cake all decorated and done. The cake is back from the fridge, and on closer inspection, let's see, yeah, it's set but not completely set, but it works for me because this is going to be such a simplistic, rustic looking cake. So I am going to transfer that onto my yep, and that simply works. So essentially that is the cake all done. So for me, I am just going to dump some chocolate pieces on top here. It's like death by chocolate. I should have probably filled the bottom parts in with more chocolate, but hey, I am not complaining. So, yep. So what we have here is a simple chocolate cake that you can actually make at home by yourself. And how hard was that? It was pretty easy to do. So if you're a beginner, because of the kind of decoration we have on this cake, it is so simplistic that you don't need anything more. Our cake is done now. So if you're a beginner, this should be easy for you to do, and I hope you will try your hands at it and get some great results from making this kind of cake right here.